Hello everybody, welcome to Crafty Soup. My name is Misty. Let me tell you about today's episode. Today is a Mystery Box Monday episode, so I will grab my 3 mystery supplies out of my box and get to work making what turns out to be 3 cards using some foiling techniques and some inky stamping techniques. So let's get started. So here is my mystery box back out for this week. I'm going to reach in here without peeking and try not to let my sense of touch influence me too much, although it did a little bit this time around, because after pulling out 2 stamp sets, I wanted to pick something that was a different shape and size than those flat packages. And this is what I ended up with, some ink and a refill, ink pad and a refill. And then these 2 stamp sets. This one is kind of a sketchy floral heart set, and this one is a Brutus Monroe kind of little monster set with a couple of sentiment sayings on there. But of course the hearts caught my attention because Valentine's Day is coming up, and I had just purchased this lovely purple foil thinking about my middle kid who likes purple, and so I thought right away that I knew I wanted to do some foiling with this stamp set. I do have a whole foiling technique video if you're interested in more foiling. We'll cover just a couple of those things here today. And this technique is the embossing foil technique. So I got my stamp prepped because it is brand new. Make sure you prep your stamps. I inked it up with an embossing ink, and I've got my white embossing powder here, and I'm just using white because my cardstock is white. And I will powder up my embossing ink, as you can see there. I heated it up off screen to set that embossing powder, and I'm moving on to other parts. I have my foil cut down to the right size, and I'm heating up an iron there on the left. And while that's heating up, I did move on to these sentiment strips. So I pulled out that ink refill. I'm not going to open up the ink pad because there will be a giveaway this time, and I want to leave that ink pad for the giveaway. But with the ink refill, I am doing some painterly strokes to create a sentiment strip, and I've got several strips here just to play with them and see if I can get something I like better than others. And really, they're all kind of nice. I like how it starts off dark and kind of fades away as you make that stroke. All right, here is the technique with the foil. Once the iron is hot, I put my foil down on my paper, cover it with scratch paper to protect everything, and then run the iron over it for about 6 seconds or so. And my iron is set on about a level 3. Every iron is different, so you'd have to practice this. And that reactivates the embossing powder, grabs onto that foil, and sticks that down. So you should always work with foil shiny or pretty side up, because that foil is actually adhered to the back side of that plastic carrier sheet. Now you saw me adding some spatters to my project, and because that paintbrush is just a really old crummy paintbrush, it fell apart and my brush fell off and splotched on my project. So I am going to fix that by trimming down my pattern a little bit more so that the image cuts off on all the edges so it doesn't look awkward just on one edge. Add more spatters and then very slight taps of blotches so that it all looks purposeful. And I'm going to color in the kind of the petals of these flowers. And then I'm going to do a glue stamping technique. Now this was actually for a future card, but because I lost my footage from this card, I'm going to show you this in advance. So this is a 2-way glue, which means it remains sticky once it's dry. And I'm going to put a little puddle on a surface that is easy to clean. I spread it out just a little bit because if your glue is too thick, it won't work too well. I'm going to stamp my stamp into that glue puddle and then gently stamp it onto my paper and then let the whole thing dry. Once it's dry, you can put your foil down on top of that tacky glue and it will transfer the foil to your project. I have a little strip of foil here. I've done the exact same thing with my sentiment strips, just different stamps, but it's the same technique. I'm putting my foil down on there, and as I pull it away, if something's not sticking all the way, you can give it a little burnish. As I pull the foil away, you can see how it grabs onto that foil and transfers. I'm going to do the last one here, and as I do this, I want to say save those foil pieces because we are going to use them, both the ones with the big flowers on the heart flowers on them and these little sentiment strips. So I try not to waste things if I can help it. All right, with that big panel, you can tape that to another piece of cardstock to use on your project, but I'm going to use it as a border for this. And because my panel was cut down, some of those flowers are going to peek out around the edges. I should have cut it down just a little bit more to get more of that technique, but because this was all fixing a mistake, it didn't really occur to me at that point. So here I am gluing that panel down. Now, when you glue on top of the foil, you're fine. And you can just glue normally. But when you flip that over to glue your foil down to your project, remember that that foil is meant to release from that plastic carrier sheet. So you're going to have to glue it specifically. Before I get to that, I have my sentiment strip here. I'm going to ink the edges because it is a white sentiment strip on a white cardstock base. I wanted to give it a little more pop. I will also put some foam dots on it to pop it up a little bit more. And then before I put that into place, here's where you need to be careful about gluing. Wherever the foil is missing from this carrier sheet is where you need to add glue, because otherwise that foil will just stick to the glue and fall off your project and you'll be left with weird glue spots on your card base. So with that glued in place, I can finish off this card and we can move on to the next card and talk about a couple more ideas and techniques. All right, that one is pretty and shiny and ready to go to my daughter. For card number 2, we're going to do a stamping, inky stamping technique. So I just squirted some color onto a surface. I'm picking up that color with my stamp. I'm going to go ahead and stamp it down. Now, before that ink dries, I'm going to do a technique with it for the third card, but stay tuned for that. So this is back to that footage because this is what this card looks like when I finished with that technique. And I'm going to do the same glue stamping technique here. So I'm filling in all of those, not all of the hearts, a lot of the hearts with that glue, letting it dry, and then getting that foil to adhere to that two-way glue. I'm saving that heart strip because we're going to use that. And there is this card base ready to go. Now I pulled back that sentiment strip from the first card, that is the leftover foil, and I'm going to tuck it around the edges of my card and tape it to the back. So if you're using a large sheet, like I mentioned, that large floral heart pattern, you can do the same thing. Tuck it around the edges of a smaller piece of cardstock and tape it to the back. That's one of the best ways to adhere foil to your paper, or the whole foil sheet, I should say, to your paper. All right, we are back for card number 3 with this inky technique. So I'm just pushing a sheet of cardstock into that ink so I don't waste it, and look at how beautiful of a texture it gives you. And I really like the drippy bits down at the bottom. So I was happy with that. I'm going to make this into a long skinny panel because the edges weren't as interesting, but that heavy drippy bit at the bottom was. And I have this sentiment strip that is just wide enough to fit across if I trim it down. So I'm going to do the same thing here with, oh, that's not a sentiment strip, that's that heart strip. So I'm going to tuck it around, fold it, and tape it into place. And we have that piece just about ready to go. So for my sentiment, I'm going to do some repeat stamping, some multi-generational stamping. So I stamp once, twice, 3 times, and a 4th time without re-inking. So you get a repetitive fade out effect, or fade in effect actually, with your sentiment. And I'm gonna do a 3rd generation background stamping with that heart stamp to get some interest and texture behind that panel. So, oops, I dropped my stamp. So I inked it up, stamped it twice off on scratch paper, and then I can stamp it once on my cardstock, and you get a much lighter color for that 3rd generation. And I'm going to finish filling in the gaps on my card base with the same technique. Now, because I didn't press hard enough, I have a blank spot, so I'm just going to cover that up with my panel. It's shifted more to the left than I would like ordinarily design-wise, but I think it's better to cover up that kind of gap more than to shift it over farther. So that will be where I will place that final card panel. And that finishes up our 3rd card. I will have a few close-ups in a moment, but let's talk about the giveaway first. I'm giving away basically all the supplies today because these are supplies that I don't think I will need in my stash. Some of them feel repetitive to what I already own. I am adding in a brand new bottle of that two-way glue in case you've never tried this technique, and a little piece of foil so that you can give this technique a try. So international viewers, you are eligible to enter this one as these aren't too expensive to ship. So I will leave all of the information on how to enter this giveaway down in the box below. And as we exit today's video, I want to give you a few close-ups of these techniques so you can see how pretty they are. Catching the shimmer and shine on film and camera is tricky, but hopefully I did my best here to give you a sense of how pretty these projects are. All right, that is it for today. I will be back on Friday with my Freebie Friday video in case you like free crafting supplies. So I do hope you will join me then, and for the rest of the week, have some artful days.